Good evening. Welcome to session 7 of David's Enemies. This time we're going to be talking about Israel's unrest and Sheba's rebellion. It's a continuation of last Bible studies timeline, so if the stuff you learned last time will apply to this one on the timeline. And of course we'll do some reviews as well. Next slide, please.
Who did not receive a list of the characters for tonight? I think it was just you and Linda and Diane.
There's a lot of names, so all the characters that don't get remembered right away, you can reference the sheet below. But I'll still make sure to explain all of them. We're on the home start. All right, first things first, let's review from Absalom's rebellion last time. So, we know that at the start, Absalom enacted his rebellion by stealing the hearts of the people of Israel. He stood at the city gate and got people on his side and used the weakness of David being the only judge as leverage. Secondly, he starts his rebellion and David and his followers have to leave Jerusalem. And David leaves 10 concubines to take care of the palace. David's priests take the Ark of the Covenant and follow David, but he sends it back along with them as his spies, and he chooses to send the Ark back because he chooses to trust in God rather than simply trusting the Ark. He believes if he's worthy of God, God will take him back to let him see the Ark once again in Jerusalem. Next, David sees his old friend Hushai on the mountain peak and sends him back as another spy and prays for Ahithophel to give back advice. Ahithophel being Uriah the Hittite and Sheba's grandfather. And Hushai is the one who gives the counter advice. Following that, Ahithophel gives Absalom advice to sleep with David's concubines that he left over at the palace. However, Ahithophel was unknowingly fulfilling a prophecy that God made to David after David had committed a sin with Sheba. Whereas somebody was going to sleep with his wives in front of all of Israel, and it happened just as stated. And Ahithophel proceeded to give advice following that, and it was denied, to which he goes home, sorts his house out, and hangs himself. We talked about why he hanged himself last time. He decided to take charge of his fate on his own, rather than being killed by them. He killed himself. Next, Absalom leads the rebellion as for Hushai's advice that David told him to give, and the rebellion army, and he gets caught in a tree where David had told the army that you need to be gentle with my son. Joab goes around that and slays him instead, thereby disobeying David. And the news comes to David and he starts mourning his son, thus completing a part of the prophecy with a sword being in his house and his wives being slept with. Alrighty, any questions so far? Next slide, please. And now we can start. So, right at the end of last time, David was mourning for his son, and we're continuing on with the very next scripture. So, Joab was told, because he was still out on the field where he sent the messenger to David because of Absalom's death, Joab was told that the king is weeping and mourning for Absalom. And for the whole army, the victory that day was turned into mourning. The king covered his face and cried aloud, "Oh, my son Absalom! Oh, Absalom, my son, my son!" And we know that last time he said other things as well, such as, "If only I had died instead of you." Now, they had just won a battle in the name of the Lord against an enemy, and they knew the Lord was on their side because we talked about the forest, where the forest assisted them in taking down Absalom's army. And David naturally is mourning his son, and you can't really fault him for that. David never wanted to kill his son. It was never part of the plan for Absalom to die, because he told them all to be gentle with him, as in take him hostage, or take him as a capture, do not kill him. But he died, so David's mourning, and the soldiers coming back from the battle are coming back to hearing David crying from the top of the castle. So there's not exactly a celebration of victory going on here. Any questions so far? Next slide, please. Then Joab, he comes back and he still hears David mourning. So From the time that he was told the news, to the messenger going to Joab out into the battlefield, to Joab returning, David was still crying, wailing loudly by the sun at the top, which is understandable because he lost his son. However, you have to remember that David is also king, and he has a responsibility to his army to let them know that they've won the battle properly, not to let them feel bad for winning the battle that they were supposed to. So Joab talks to King David as he sees him in mourning still. He says, "Today you have humiliated all your men who have just saved your life and the lives of your sons and daughters and the lives of your wives and concubines. You love those who hate you, and you hate those who love you." So he's trying to set David straight right now by being extremely strict. He's being very sharp and precise with his wording right now. We can continue to the next slide. It continues. "You have made it clear today that the commanders and their men mean nothing to you. I see that you would be pleased if Absalom were alive today and all of us were dead. Now go out and encourage your men. I swear by the Lord, if you do not go out, not a man will be left by you by nightfall." So he's basically telling David, yes, you've lost your son. However, if you don't set yourself straight, you're going to lose your kingdom too. And bear in mind, he's being strict with David because he feels the need to be. He's taking it into his own hands again like Joab usually does. However, he also has to know that it wasn't in David's plan for his son to die, and he's the reason that his son is dead. Next slide, please. "And just as stated, this will be worse for you than all the calamities that have come on you from your youth till now, as in losing his kingdom." So the king got up. He decided to listen to Joab, and he took his seat in the gateway of Mahanaim. And to make sure that y'all follow what Mahanaim is, or recall that David left Jerusalem when Absalom went. So this is where David went to. He went to the city of Mahanaim, which is a fortified city, and that's where he was having his base of operations whenever he was conflicting with Absalom. When the men were told the king is sitting in the gateway, they all came before him. Meanwhile, the Israelites back home in Jerusalem had fled to their homes. So the king sitting in the gateway is important here because that means that before now, David had not went to go face his men. He had been mourning on the rooftops for all of them to hear in that city. So now they're saying that the king is coming to them and actually confronting them as the king should following the battle. And because it immediately skips to the next part, we know that David did address them for their victory. Any questions on that so far? Or any thoughts? It's pretty straightforward right now. And over here, it says, meanwhile, the Israelites had fled to their homes. So the Israelites back at home, many of them turned against David and supported Absalom. So now that Absalom's dead, they're kind of in disarray because they rebuked David, saw him leave, and now the person that they decided to support as king is now dead, and they know that David's still alive. So there's kind of a bit of mayhem going on in Israel because they don't know what faith they're going to have with them. They don't know whether David's going to be merciful. They don't know how their lives are going to turn out. They don't know anything. They don't even know whether they should try to bring David back. So essentially, this statement right here is saying that even though David had won the battle against Absalom, that doesn't necessarily mean his kingdom is restored to him because the people had rejected him. Next slide, please. Who would like to read this slide?
2 Samuel 19, David returns. Throughout the tribes of Israel, all the people were arguing among themselves, saying, "The king delivered us from the hand of our enemies. He is the one who rescued us from the hand of the Philistines. But now he has fled the country to escape from Absalom. And Absalom, whom we anointed to rule over us, has died in battle. So why do you say nothing about bringing the king back?"
Yes. So they were afraid to start having a rising up, bringing David back because of all that transpired here. And yet they still remember, even despite the fact that they turned from David, they knew that he saved them from the hand of the Philistines with Goliath. They knew that time and time again, David had won them battles, and yet they still turned their backs on him. And honestly, a lot of times that's how it is with us in Christ. There will be times that despite how much Christ has done for us, there will be times in our lives where we sin and turn away from him, and we feel ashamed, and that's what's going on here. So it can be a mirror of our lives with God. Any thoughts on this one so far? Next slide, please. So, King David, instead of running into Israel and declaring himself king again, what he does is he sends a message to his priests that are in Israel. Remember that he sent Zadok and Abiathar as spies so that they can get information from Absalom in the last Bible study. Now, knowing they're still there, he decides to send them a message. He says, "Ask the elders of Judah, why should you be the last to bring the king back to his palace? Since what is being said throughout Israel has reached the king at his quarters," meaning he knows what's going on because word has been sent to him that Israel's in disarray. "You are my relatives, my own flesh and blood, so why should you be the last to bring back the king?" The reason he's saying this to the elders of Judah is because David was born in Judah. And David was also king of Judah before he was king of all the tribes of Israel. So he's basically saying they should be leading the fact of bringing him back as king. They shouldn't be the last ones being on the fence about it and afraid. No, Judah should be the one most loyal to him as the people he first ruled over. Any questions or thoughts on this one? Next slide, please. "And say to Amasa, are you not my own flesh and blood?" And before I continue reading further, on the papers it shows Amasa on there. Amasa is the commander for Absalom's army. He is one who rebelled against David and decided to take command for Absalom. So he was a major enemy for David among Absalom's rebellion when he lived. So now David is trying to send a message to Amasa, who is also Joab's cousin. And he says, are you not my own flesh and blood? Because Joab is David's nephew, and Amasa is Joab's cousin. So they're all related by blood. So he wants to send a message to Amasa that says, "May God deal with me, be it ever so severely, if you are not the commander of my army for life in place of Joab." So why do you think that he's trying to replace Joab with Amasa? What's the strategy here that y'all are seeing?
Because Joab was the commander for his enemy before?
Amasa was the commander for the enemy.
Oh, Amasa.
And he wants to make Amasa the commander for his army now. Not just the commander, the high commander.
I don't think because killed his son.
Yes. So what's happening here is Joab disobeyed David's orders.
That's right.
So he's trying to put Joab in his place.
But he is his nephew.
Yes.
They can't kill him.
And he's not going to go and kill Joab. Plus, Joab's done great work. He's been one of Israel's best commanders in all history in terms of what he accomplished. He knows that Joab's not getting demoted to nothing. He's still going to be a commander. But he wants Amasa to be the high commander to put Joab in his place.
So Joab was the one that killed David's son?
Yeah, Joab, David's commander, is the one that killed Absalom. And he went against David's orders to be gentle with Absalom and take him back home. So
Okay, that's right.
because of that, this is David's way of punishing Joab by bringing Amasa as the new commander.
So letting him down and bringing the other one up.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, and this is also a multi-step strategy. And the reason I say that is because David knows that Israel is in disarray right now. So Amasa and all the people that were in the army for Absalom were originally in David's army. But he doesn't want to just kill half of his army. He wants to actually be benevolent, and he wants to show them that he's accepting them by even saying that Amasa can be the commander for him again, but not just the commander, the high commander, to put Joab in his place. So it's reconciliation as well as punishing Joab.
Politics.
Yes. So David won over the hearts of the men of Judah so that they were all of one mind. I highlighted this because it shows that David is not enforcing himself on them. He's showing benevolence, and he wants them to accept him. It's just like God. God's not going to enforce himself on us. He wants us to accept him.
Yes.
And David's mirroring the strategies he's learned from following the Lord. So they sent word to the king, "Return you and all your men." Then the king returned and went as far as the Jordan River. And remember, last Bible study I talked about the low water crossing the ford. David basically stopped at that same exact area again where he'd be able to cross back. And he stopped there because, it'll explain on the next slide. I just wanted to let you know where he was. So, now the men of Judah had come to Gilgal to go out and meet the king and bring him across the Jordan. When the king crossed over to Gilgal, all the troops of Judah and half the troops of Israel had taken the king over. And I included this map over here because I actually bust out that tool he gave me. We can see that Jerusalem is here in the southern kingdom of Judah, and David currently is at the Jordan River at the low water crossing. So he traveled north whenever Absalom's army was coming at him. He traveled into the tribes of Israel. And all the people of Judah traveled to David to bring him back to Jerusalem, and half the troops of Israel came to meet him as well. So he had both kingdoms which he ruled over. They're two different provinces, but they're still unified under King David. Just to bring in some light, because I was a little confused reading initially. But now we know that Judah has the 2 tribes of Israel on the bottom, and up here are the 10 tribes of Israel.
So we have the Benjamites on the bottom and Judah on the bottom, right? And Judah?
Yes. And on the top we have the 10 other tribes of Israel. They haven't become the full 12 tribes quite yet.
And I see the Philistines is the modern day Gaza Strip.
Yes.
Wow. That's something, huh?
They're the modern day what?
Gaza Strip.
The Philistines.
Hear about on TV, the Gaza parking lot.
Yes.
So the reason I wanted to include this, and I liked this slide, is because David left his kingdom when he was leaving Absalom completely rejected by most of the supporters and followers he had. But as he was returning, Judah and Israel are now coming to bring him back with love and support. So that just shows God's favor with David. Next slide, please.
Can't stop God's anointed.
Mm-hmm.
What great wisdom God gave David to do that.
Yes,
When
exactly.
you really think about it, that's beyond human logic, especially when he's broken and not thinking too clearly, but God gave him that wisdom.
Mm-hmm.
God will give us the wisdom we need and we'll listen to him. His pride would have said something else, but listening to God.
This says so much about David. Still, even in times of mourning when everybody turned against him, still following God's advice, God's word.
Amazing.
And it shows that even in the darkest points where you're at the point of losing everything, God can bring everybody back and more.
Just imagine you didn't have Jesus.
Amen.
Still in the covenant of the law. That's what God will still do for them.
Yeah.
Who would like to read this slide? David returns.
Soon all the men of Israel were coming to the king and saying to him, why did our brothers, the men of Jesus, steal the king away and bring him and his household across the Jordan together with all his men? All the men of Judah answered the men of Israel, we did this because the king is closely related to us. Why are you angry about it?
So this slide is kind of childish because it shows that both splits, they're trying to prove their loyalty to David, but they're bickering with each other about who's more loyal. So Judah's defense as to why they're coming to David, which they shouldn't really need a defense, they're loyal to David. They're saying because the king is closely related to us because David was born over there. And
They're bragging.
yes, and David was king of them first. So they're having a bit of a little dispute. So even now, David returning, there's still some like petty drama going on because now it's, well, we're more loyal than you, and no, David, we have a way bigger right to David, and it's just turning into something messy for no reason. Any questions and thoughts on this slide? Next slide, please. And continuing on, then the men of Israel answered the men of Judah, well, we have 10 shares in the king, so we have a greater claim on David than you have, because they have 10 tribes of Israel over there. Why then do you treat us with contempt? Weren't we the first to speak of bringing back our king? And the reason they say this is because remember that David told the people of Judah, why are you the last? So Israel's bragging now that no, we said we should bring David back first. So, but the men of Judah pressed their claims even more forcefully than the men of Israel. So it's turning into a mess, and there's a lot of heated emotion going on right now. And what happens when there's heated emotion? Conflict arises. Next slide, please. So, now, a troublemaker named Sheba, son of Bichri, a Benjamite, so he's from the southern province of Judah, and a Benjamite is important here because he's from the tribe of King Saul. So, Sheba is there in the midst of that petty drama, and he takes advantage of it. He sounds the trumpet he has, and he shouts, "We have no share in David, no part in Jesse's son. Every man to his tent, Israel." So all the men of Israel deserted David to follow Sheba. So after all that time of them arguing and being petty, talking about how loyal they are, the first moment they have, because keep in mind they also rejected David whenever Absalom came up, they decided to follow someone else who was rebelling against David.
Rebellions come up.
Yes. So now we see who the actual loyal ones were, because as soon as somebody else comes up to rise against David, oh, now Israel's just gone. Next slide, please. But the men of Judah stayed by their king, all the way from the Jordan River down to Jerusalem. They followed him. When David returned to his palace in Jerusalem, he took the 10 concubines he had left to take care of the palace and put them in a house under guard. He provided for them, but he had no sexual relations with them. They were kept in confinement to the day of their death, living as widows. So David was not going to marry people that slept with his son. And it wasn't their fault, because it was prophesied that it would happen, for one, but for two, they couldn't exactly say no to Absalom. Otherwise, Absalom would have just enacted vengeance on them right away. He wasn't exactly somebody who was God-fearing and going for something in the name of the Lord. No, Absalom was coming to rule and do it as his own way. So, even despite that, though, David didn't want to go marry them to other people because that can cause political turmoil and relations. So what does he do? He keeps them at the palace, essentially, is what that's saying. They're not allowed to really leave the palace because they could be in danger. And on top of that, he still tries to provide for them for whatever they need at the palace. So they're still probably living better than people on the streets, but even so, there's still a sad fate for them because they'll never marry, and they're stuck living at the palace for the rest of their lives as widows. Why does it say widows? Because Absalom is dead.
So these 10 concubines, those of you who weren't here last Wednesday, originally belonged just to David. But then when he fled Jerusalem, he left them behind to take care of the palace. And that's when his son Absalom
Followed Ahithophel's advice to sleep with them and fulfilled the prophecy.
Yes, he slept with all of his father's concubines. And you're right, fulfilled the prophecy. And so since they ended up belonging to David's son, Absalom, that's how come they're living as widows, because he
Absalom
died.
took him in for himself and then perished.
Mm-hmm.
And David was not, like I said, not going to marry someone who his son slept with.
Mm-hmm.
So, unfortunately, that is the fate of them. But even despite that, at least they were taken care of and knew that they were safe to the day of their death.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's better than leaving them out.
Yeah, better
Yeah.
than kicking them out on the streets
Yeah.
for them to die. They were still treated in the palace. So, living as a concubine is probably better than living as a commoner.
Mm-hmm.
Who would like to read this slide?
2 Samuel 20, Sheba, what did you say? it was?
Sheba. Yes.
Sheba rebels. Then the king said to Amasa, "Summon the men of Judah to come to me within 3 days, and be here yourself." But when Amasa went to summon Judah, he took longer than the time the king had set for him. Sorry. David said to Abishai, "Now Sheba will do us more harm than Absalom did. Take your master's men and pursue him, or he will find fortified cities and escape from us."
Yes. So, This is the difference when it comes to David dealing with somebody who's not his family and not his son, but somebody who's truly just a rebel and not related to him. He knows that Sheba is not going to want to just simply rule Jerusalem. He knows there's going to be something more to it, more destructive, because he says we have no share in David, so obviously he's rejecting the kingdom. So, what does he do? He tells the new high commander, Amasa, he gives him a time limit because he needs to be fast at killing the seeds of this rebellion. He gives him 3 days to do this and to go and to go summon the southern kingdom of Judah to support him. But Amasa takes longer than what he was supposed to. And the reason that's said is essentially what that's saying is he probably wasn't doing as good of a job as a high commander as Joab was. So, immediately, David wants to pursue him right away so that Sheba can't slip away and start building an uprising. He needs to get rid of this now. So David immediately is taking action. Next slide, please. So Joab and his men went out under the command of Abishai. So Joab was high commander, now he's taking commands from somebody who's below the high commander. They marched out from Jerusalem to pursue Sheba. While they were at the great rock in Gibeon, Amasa came to meet with them. Joab was wearing his military tunic, and strapped over at his waist was a belt with a dagger in its sheath. And you know, if it's making mention that there's a dagger in its sheath, something's probably going to happen with the dagger. As he stepped forward, it dropped out of its sheath. Any thoughts on this slide?
It was a way, it was
He
set
bent
up.
over to get it and then they cut his head off.
He went down to get it and whoosh.
So Joab is probably not very happy.
He did as he thought.
Joab is probably not very happy that Amasa has his new position right now.
Yeah.
Next slide, please. Picture might give it away. Joab said to Amasa, "How are you, my brother?" Keep in mind they're cousins. Then Joab took Amasa by the beard with his right hand to kiss him. What does this remind you of? This kind of reminds me of the kiss of death with Judas. Amasa was not on his guard against the dagger in Joab's hand, so it fell out and he had the dagger in his hand afterwards because he had to pick it up. And Joab plunged it into his belly, and his intestines spilled out on the ground. Without being stabbed again, just a single strike, Amasa's dead. Then Joab and his brother Abishai pursued Sheba. So, for one, this shows how deadly Joab is as a warrior, because he knows exactly where to strike. He didn't take the time to go all the way up here. No, he knew where to strike down here to make sure he got the job done. And on top of that, Joab and his brother Abishai pursued Sheba. That means that Abishai did not fight against Joab here. He was like, no, that's fine. We're going to continue following Joab. So Joab's already basically taking his reins as the high commander again and getting rid of what's in his way, even if it's his cousin.
Yeah.
So immediately Abishai sees Joab still as the high commander, and he decides to follow him to Sheba. Next slide, please. One of Joab's men stood beside Amasa, laying on the ground, and said, "Whoever favors Joab and whoever is for David, let him follow Joab." Amasa lay wallowing in his blood in the middle of the road. And the man saw that all the troops came to a halt there. So you can imagine if you see your high commander dead and laying in a puddle of blood on the floor, that you're probably not going to take too much action as a soldier because you don't know what the heck's going on. When he realized that everyone who came up to Amasa stopped, he decided to remove the distraction. He dragged him from the road into a field and threw a garment over him. After Amasa had been removed from the road, what does everyone do? They decide to follow Joab and pursue Sheba. And it says they went on with Joab. It doesn't say Abishai, it's saying Joab. So he's leading everyone once again. Next slide, please. Now Sheba, running away at this point, passed through all the tribes of Israel to Abel Beth Makkah, which is a fortified city. And I included this picture over here because it was on top of a hill and it's fortified. So It was one of the mother cities of Israel. And I thought that picture was interesting because, of course, right now it's no longer there on the hill in pictures, but this is what the art of what it was. All the troops with Joab came and besieged Sheba in the city. So they're not just knocking on the gate, they're coming to start sieging the city, even though it's still one of their cities. They built a siege ramp and stood against the outer walls. While they were battering the wall to bring it down, a wise woman called from the city. She says, "Listen, listen, tell Joab to come here so I can speak to him." So she knows exactly who's there because he is the high commander of David's army. And she told him, long ago, they used to say, "Get your answer at Abel," and that settled it. We are the peaceful and faithful in Israel. You are trying to destroy a city that is a mother in Israel. Why do you want to swallow up the Lord's inheritance? So what does Joab say? "Far be it from me," he replied. "Far be it from me to swallow up and destroy it. That's not the case." So she doesn't know why they're there. She just sees that they're there besieging the city, and she has no context of what's going on here. Next slide, please. "A man named Sheba," Joab is explaining to her, "son of Bichri, from the hill country of Ephraim, has lifted up his hand against the king, against David. Hand over this one man, and I'll withdraw from the city." So what does the woman say to Joab? "Okay, his head will be thrown from you to the wall. Thrown to you from the wall." So she's not going to say, "You don't need to come in the city and do all this ransacking." No, we'll just, you know what, we'll kill him for you and throw his head over at you. So their city truly was loyal to David, if she's saying that.
Yep.
She just took him at his word. Then the woman went to all the people with her wise advice. They captured Sheba and they cut off his head and threw it over the wall to Joab. So this shows the fate of people who rebelled against David that weren't his family. They were quickly exorcised. Next slide, please. So Joab sounded the trumpet, and his men dispersed from the city, each returning to his home. And Joab went back to the king in Jerusalem. Joab was once again over Israel's entire army. Why was he over Israel's entire army despite David demoting him? Because the army chose Joab. The people still saw Joab as the high commander. So you can imagine there might be conflicts with this later on down the road. But for now, this is where we'll end today's Bible study. Thank you all for listening so far.
That's what I say.
Any thoughts or anything about this?
That's something how they just.
I like
Oh,
this
back in the
one.
day, they would just handle it real quick.
Yeah, she was like, "Okay, yeah."
Just go chop up his head.
Oh, there's a rebel in here? All
Yeah,
right.
just throw it on the wall.
We'll get him going.
What's his name? What's his
Then
pipe?
stop the
Oh, yes, thank you.
I like this one because it showed how fast David will act. And it shows